What is up, everyone? This is Ete with another episode of The Company Next Door. Today, I'm very excited. I have a special guest with me today that has done a lot of help for me personally over the years. I love her work. I love the company that they're building. Everything is awesome. And one of the things I like, there's some different approaches to a more traditional service. And we're talking in the field of counseling and therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And the company is called Trail Talk. And we're going to talk. I'll let her explain it because she's going to be much better than I. But I'll tell my story about it too. But today I have Megan Perry with me here, and we are outside for the first time because they are called Trail Talk. And, we're out on the trails hiking normally, so we decided to do this interview outside. So if you hear any type of wind or birds or random kids fighting, that's just what you get. So anyway, this is Megan Perry's here with me outside. How are you, Megan?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Ete.
Awesome. Thank you for coming in and taking a little bit of time. So one of the things I love about Trail Talk is just this idea, because I think everybody knows that, you're out in the garden, you're pulling weeds, you're mowing your lawn, you're walking, you're riding your bike, you're hiking, whatever you're doing. It seems to be when your body moves, your brain just kind of unlocks and you do some of your best thinking. Mm-hmm. Was that part of the experience with the idea behind Trail Talk?
Absolutely. So Allison Page started Trail Talk up in Park City in 2010, and she tells the story that she was outside walking, and it just kind of was a revelation to her that her best thinking was when she was out hiking and walking, and particularly when she did it with friends, that's when she had the most clarity and insight. And it occurred to her, why don't we do this in therapy? If people are coming to get clarity and insight, why don't we do walking and talking for therapy instead of just sitting in the office? And then she took that idea and made a whole brand and a whole type of therapy out of it.
And a great name. Trail Talk is it's cool. It's simple. It's fun. You can put it on a sticker. I mean, it's perfect. Yeah. And so someone who has spent a lot of years doing therapy, going from the traditional, myself in the office on the couch. I mean, you guys can picture this, and the therapist says, "Hey, how you feeling?" And then how did you feel about that? That kind of that's kind of the joke. But to this new idea of we're moving, we're active. Mm-hmm. I personally have felt my brain definitely unlocks, and I get those insights, and I understand things. I think the things that I'm being taught, they stick with me a little better.
That's awesome. That's the hope. And people have walked and talked in therapy before. I know when we've had, maybe some adolescents or kids that have trouble opening up or connecting, walking has been a great method. People who maybe are just afraid to sit on the couch or go to something clinical and it feels really formal. It also just helps release that pressure and make it feel more like just a conversation with a friend, but you're getting an expertise of an actual trained therapist. So I think it brings greater clarity to be moving, to be outdoors. It helps you be present and mindful. And I think it helps reduce a lot of the stigma behind getting counseling.
Awesome. And we're going to come back to that because I want to talk about that stigma and
Sure.
if there's been any change. So probably the most important thing I didn't mention is Megan, like myself, is from South Jersey.
Jersey.
Yeah, we're from Jersey. So I got to find out, how did you get here? Why are you here? So let's go back to the Jersey days. You grew up, what town did you grow up in?
Technically Monroeville. Nobody's heard of that.
Yeah, that's like paint the picture. What does Monroeville look like?
Oh my goodness. Cornfields or soybean surrounded my house. If I wanted to go anywhere, my mom had to drive me. Everything was a set up play date or, something like that because she couldn't walk anywhere. And then I guess the bigger town where I went to high school was Woodstown.
Yeah.
They have a rodeo there.
Yep,
It's kind of its
Woodstown.
claim to fame.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went to Rowan College, which I believe is your old stomping ground.
Yep, it's in Glassboro.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was the funniest part is when I came out here, I worked with a therapist out of New York for about 8 years, and I moved here from Jersey, and I was really hesitant to find someone, but I saw the Trail Talk concept, and I thought, that's cool. I think that fits what I'm trying to do where I'm at. And I remember making this phone call. I think you probably don't remember this, but I left a message on the Trail Talk number. I think I was looking for Allison because she was the founder at the time. And I left a message saying something like, look, I'm really hesitant. I'm not sure if I even want to get involved again. But anyway, I need something. And then anyway, so 2 or 3 days later, I get a call from you, I think. And you're like, yeah, I'm from South Jersey, from this little town. And I'm like, that's a sign. So same area.
Uh-huh.
Awesome.
Like 15 minutes from each other.
Yeah. So that was my sign. Like, this is it. And it's been life-changing for me. Growing up in South Jersey, small town, you were way out there.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a psychologist, a therapist?
Oh, that's a great question. I hope this is inspiring to people that I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to high school, enjoyed it, figured the next step was college because, that's what you do. Went to college, had no idea what I wanted to pursue, started taking gen eds, started taking psychology courses, social work courses, and kind of started to feel like that was the only thing that interested me. Started to find my people, kind of my tribe, that people that I really clicked with were in those courses and classes. The teachers that I loved were teaching those courses, and it just started to feel like it fit like a glove. But I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. I just knew that I liked psychology, so I graduated with a psychology degree and went back to waitressing, and typical South Jersey fashion, at the restaurant I worked at, someone said, "Hey, you should talk to my sister and interview at the place she works." So she came in for breakfast and interviewed me, and I had a job.
Oh, that's funny.
And that was my first job in mental health. And then from there, I started to figure out that I really wanted to be a therapist, went to grad school to do individual counseling.
So when you were growing up in Jersey, did you have any experience with therapy on the other side? Did you ever go through it, or what? How did you come to care about it, or was it in this process where you start, wow, I actually like this, I'm pretty good at it?
It's another good question. So my mom made me go to counseling once as like an 11 or 12-year-old, and I of course hated the therapist, wouldn't talk to him, closed off, challenged him on everything. I think I went twice, and that was my experience of counseling, which is hilarious now that I'm a therapist. But no, I think the role that I had in my childhood was I tended to be the listener. I tended to be the person everybody came to. I've always just been interested in understanding people and being understood. And so I think that just permeated a lot of my relationships. And in high school, a lot of us start having troubles and mental health stuff starts popping up, and found myself having a lot of conversations with, kids that were maybe suicidal, and, midnight phone calls, and, just having those conversations, trying to talk people off a ledge. And I'd never thought anything of it. I just thought that was true to my nature. And then after finding in college that I really liked psychology, it just seemed like it fit. I like to listen. I like to help. I really want to be involved. And I'm very much, an advocate for change and being proactive. And if you're not happy with something, then let's take action and do something to empower ourselves. So, yeah.
And I don't know if that's a typical South Jersey mindset, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Seriously, yeah.
So, we at your home life growing up, tell us a little bit about your parents.
Sure.
Your dad out of the house, mom working out of the house, home, or?
So my mom was a school teacher until, she had the kids, and then she stayed home, took care of us. My dad was a real estate agent, and actually passed away when I was in 6th grade, which was a complete shock. Had a heart attack out of nowhere.
Wow.
And that changed the course for my family quite a bit. I could spend a lot of time talking about what that was like, but one of the beautiful things that came out of it is I got an awesome stepdad and stepfamily, and they really helped me grow as a person. So as hard as situations like that are, they really do give you an opportunity to grow as a person, and I don't think I could have done this position had that not happened. So that was life-changing in more than one way. But yeah, and then I have one biological sister who's a couple years older than me, still back in South Jersey, and then I gained a couple of step siblings, a few older and one younger, and I've gotten pretty close with some of them. Yeah.
Wow. Can you give us one piece of advice? I mean, I'll ask you this for someone that is going through that, maybe losing their father at a young age, maybe a teen that could be listening and losing a parent. I know that could be an hour reply, but could you just give one tip that you kind of took away?
Oof, that's hard.
It is hard.
Only one thing. I think, it was hard for a long time, and I think the hardest thing was, I guess this is probably the biggest experience for me. The hardest thing was watching the people around me grieve and suffer. That was the hardest thing. My mom tried so hard to be strong, and oh goodness, she'll probably listen to this, and I've never said that to her, but I've seen her walk out on the porch and try to hide her tears, trying to be strong and protective of us, and me seeking and craving, wanting to know how she really felt about it. And I think that was kind of maybe the turning point, that relationships were the most important thing to me, and that I never wanted to miss out on time with people that I cared about. And that's really been kind of a leading philosophy in my life, is to prioritize and give time and energy to the people that I love the most, because you never know how much time you're going to get. So to not take things for granted. So I know it's kind of cliche,
Yeah,
but truly
no.
that's what I took away from it. And I try to never forget that lesson. I try to always think about the future and how I'll look back on things and make sure that my choices align with my values. There I am
Gotcha.
getting into therapy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in hindsight, that's probably
Yeah.
the biggest takeaway. So it was hard. There was a lot of tears and a lot of anger and a lot of weird emotions and behaviors. But at the end of the day, that was the takeaway.
Wow. And I can see how that experience would help shape you and prepare you kind of for what you're doing today.
Yeah.
That brings another level of eye-opening and compassion and empathy that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah. And I think the thing that helped me the most, I really, I watch people go through not just loss of parent, but even divorces and gaining
Yeah.
a step parent. And as much as I love my dad and he was amazing, I wouldn't trade the experience I have with my
Wow.
stepdad because he's been awesome. And
Yeah.
he's a totally different person, but he's added so much benefit to our family that, I could not trade that experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So growing up in Jersey, you end up going to Rowan State, which is in Glassboro, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
which is my hometown. And then did you go out after that? Did you end up in Pennsylvania?
So I went
forget.
to Pennsylvania first. I did
Okay.
my undergrad up in Eastern College near Villanova,
That's
and
what
then
I was
I
thinking
came
of.
back to Glassboro
Okay.
for my first, not counseling, but just therapy job or mental health job, and then went to grad school at Rowan.
Gotcha. So, all right. So you're at Rowan then, and
Mm-hmm.
you've at this point you know what you want to do. You've got it. You enjoy this. You've got at least some type of general direction you're going in. But now, how do we get from there to Utah?
Oh boy.
Yeah. There's a huge
Sure.
gap because I actually don't know. I mean, everyone I find there's a lot of people from the East Coast here
Yeah.
moving to this part of Utah, but everyone has a really interesting story how they got here.
Sure. So we were in Jersey for a while, and then we ended up in Baltimore. I think it was 6 or 8 years. Yeah, I'm not there anymore. You're good. So my husband was working in the video game industry, and so there's no video game industry in South Jersey. Yeah. So we ended up in Baltimore where he got his first job, and he had kind of exhausted the studios. A lot of times they shut down after they finish a game or they do massive layoffs, and so there's not a lot of positions. And so it was looking like after 8 years in Baltimore, if he stayed in that field, we'd be moving a lot, which in the nature of my career is really hard to do. You get with clients and build a caseload and develop rapport, and the last thing you want to do is move state to state, get licensed,
start all
else.
over.
Yeah, build rapport with a new set of clients, and they have to lose their therapist. So he's a very considerate husband and was like, I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to keep moving around because that's the nature of his job. So we're kind of at this weird juncture, not loving Baltimore. Had some great friends there, but otherwise didn't necessarily love it. And I was just becoming a therapist at that point and kind of deciding what direction I wanted my career to go in. He wanted to do a career change. And then we had a friend invite us out to Steamboat Springs, and then that changed everything.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we had to live in the mountains. We had to go have this experience. It was the time in our life we could do it. And so we looked all over Colorado because that's where we were sure we were going to move. And then a friend of ours moved to Salt Lake and had him come visit. And mind you, there were pictures everywhere. You can't believe how big the mountains are. It's so crazy. You have to come see this, because he was out here skiing with him. And had no idea that Utah was so unique. Skiing, desert, the airport's right there, these beautiful little towns.
Yeah.
It was just perfect. It was everything that we had wanted.
But there, I guarantee, I'll probably put money on this, you never thought or set out to live in Utah one day.
No.
Yeah, because that's how I was.
Does anybody?
No, and that was, and I hope we're not offending anybody.
Right?
When you're not from here, you're on the other coast. You just don't. It's just not a thought. Like maybe California, right? Jerseyans go to California, Florida, but Utah's just, what is it? Where is it? That was my first question.
If you're not I wasn't a skier growing up, so I mean, even Colorado, Utah, they weren't on the map for me at all. So I never even had considered it.
And I know since you've been here, it's unlocked something for you on the nature side.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, because I know for me, I never growing up in Jersey, I was just playing music, going to the movies, the things that we do in the city. But now mountain biking and kayaking, that's what I live for.
Yeah.
How's
My
that?
husband jokes, he's like, wow, you actually have hobbies now. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I did before. Now I mountain bike, I'm running, I'm hiking, I'm doing all this stuff. Yeah. I love it.
That's awesome. So you're looking for Colorado, steamboat, and then your husband's out with his buddy in Salt Lake, and you're like, this is the next best thing.
Yeah, well, I kind of skipped a step. So we're looking for jobs in Colorado and, everything as far as finding where can we fly back to Jersey and visit family, where can we find a small enough town that's not overpopulated, and then where can we find jobs in that small town and make it to an airport. And this is the description of Heber, by the way.
Exactly.
And that did not exist in Colorado. And so he came to Salt Lake, met that friend here, and then said, well, maybe we should look at some places or look at jobs in Utah. And then I found Trail Talk, and Trail Talk's what sold us on coming to Utah.
Okay.
Because at this point, I'm sitting in an office in Baltimore, no windows, doing 8 hours of session a day, never outside. It gets dark out at 5 o'clock, and I'm like, well, I haven't seen daylight since I came in or after I left. And then I have no windows. And so this idea of Trail Talk where I could actually do therapy outdoors, and I have to admit it's kind of selfish. I wanted to do it for me.
Yeah.
To be outside walking and getting exercise. And you take one look at Mount Timpanogos, and of course, who wouldn't want to be outside walking and looking at this? And so I was so intimidated when I saw her website. I was like, oh my gosh, she's really got it together. There's no way I'm going to get hired here. But came out, talked to Allison. She did my interview on a playground because why not? That's how she is, very experiential.
Was it hard to get the interview with
No,
Allison?
not at all.
She wasn't intimidating. She was easy, accessible.
She's great.
Okay.
She is a lover of Trail Talk, and she wants to share it with the world. So if someone wants to come talk to her about working for her or doing therapy or anything in any capacity, she will always make time for a conversation. She is so accessible. She did forget that I was coming from Jersey, though. She's like, oh, well, when can we meet? I'm like, well, I'm here for 3 days. Oh, where are you coming from? Jersey. Oh, you flew here? Yes. That was really fun. But yeah, no, and she really just wants to grow the company. And so I was excited about it. I was willing to make the move out here. And so it fit perfect for me. It fit perfect for her. And then I think the other selling point was not only could I be a therapist and keep doing my craft and do sessions and do them outside, but she talked about this idea of growing the business and opening affiliates. And at that point, I had no experience with running a private practice or business and was not sure it was something I wanted to do. It sounded pretty intimidating. And she just kept it simple. She's very down to earth. I don't know what I'm doing. We're figuring this out as we go. We'll find the resources. We'll figure it out. And so I worked for her as a therapist for about a year up in Park City, and then we tell the story differently. You get to hear my side. I say she pushed me out of the nest and said, you're going to go open your own affiliate of Trail Talk, and this is how we're going to do it. Well, that's my version.
That's your version. Okay.
She's like, no, Megan came out here fully with the intention of opening a private practice.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, well, I entertained the idea, but I didn't know I was going to do that. So then I opened the affiliate in Provo thinking, we live in Heber, but Provo has so many more people. It would probably be more successful down there. Opened that and it blew up. And really, it got super busy, and then opened up Trail Talk Heber, I think, in 2018.
Okay, so how long have you been with Trail Talk?
Since 2015.
Okay, so it was after that first year where you became an affiliate.
Yep.
And now you're running Provo. Is it just Provo? Is it Utah County? How's it?
That's a great question. Right now,
or is that a gray area?
Well, we're actually working on making it a less gray area this week.
Okay.
But the idea, she wants to franchise and eventually open lots of Trail Talks, and it just kind of depends on the numbers. We focus on Provo, Orem, but currently get some surrounding area to that. Morgan Gonzalez, one of the therapists that works for me in Provo, decided to launch a Trail Talk Salt Lake City. So she's already expanding from there. And then Tanner, who works for me in Heber, he lives up in Ogden, and he wants to open a branch up in Ogden probably sometime next year. So to answer your question, it is kind of all of Utah County right now, but there is opportunity for other locations to pop up.
Well, for me, on the business end, I find this intriguing. And I love what you said earlier. Allison's like, I don't know exactly what we're doing, but we're just going to do it together and figure it out. Because I'm in a similar space myself. And so I love First of all, I think that's a great lesson. I'm coming to find most entrepreneurs don't know what they're doing. It's like literally like we just take a step and then oh yeah, that'll work. And, you just keep trying things. And it sounds like you got to where you guys are.
Yeah, and it takes so much of the pressure off. It's not like this expectation that you have to know what you're doing and you have to have all these qualifications. You can kind of figure it out as you go. And another therapy thing, like trust your methods, and make sure you're making your decisions in a way that, aligns with your value systems, and then you can't go wrong.
So how much of your time right now, so you're trying to build Provo, you're trying to build Heber, who else knows what else you're trying to build? Well, you do. How much of your time goes to that side of it, so the business side?
Yeah.
And then how much of your time is going to, percentage-wise, roughly, to being a therapist?
It ebbs and flows. Right now, I'm in kind of the sweet spot where it's running smoothly, so I don't have to spend too much time in it.
Okay.
But when I was first starting, a ton of time. Allison is trying to make it as turnkey as possible, but with me replicating and being the first person, there was a lot of figuring out that we had to do. But it's a weird thing. I've actually enjoyed that side of it a whole lot more than I thought that I would.
Yeah.
So even though there's been a lot of time and effort to it, it really hasn't felt much like work. It's this beautiful creation that's kind of my own. And so there's this pride and there's this desire to want to work in it.
And this excitement.
Yeah.
As you're building it and seeing what works and doesn't work, it comes with hard times, but it's pretty, because you're paving a road that you've never seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. So... but percentage-wise, I think, my counseling and my appointments have always been my top priority.
Yeah.
And I will never give up my time doing that. I mean, I may decrease it because, we preach self-care and I try my best to do that. But, that's always the highest percentage. And I don't know, I do probably 20 to 30 appointments with clients a week, and then however much time, I don't count it.
Yeah.
So the rest of the time goes to writing notes, which I procrastinate on, and then running the business side of things.
Gotcha. So as far as, let's dive into the counselor side of you, the therapist side. You've been doing this for, since Baltimore. So we have 10 plus years, 15 years, or?
I'm really bad at math.
Yeah, okay, we'll just make something
I have
up.
no
A
idea.
while.
Probably like 10, a little over 10 years, yeah.
On that side, are you still learning and growing as a therapist?
Oh my gosh, it never ends.
Okay, because I've always wondered this. I'm like, all right, do you just hear the same stories 10 times a day? And are you, what's that like?
Sure. It's funny, even just today, Morgan and I were emailing, trying to help one of the other therapists with something, and Morgan put something in an email, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've never heard this. Can you please tell me more about it? Actually, can you run a staff meeting and teach all of us about it? And she's like, sure. So sometimes it, just pops up in everyday little things where we're evolving and growing. But the other fun part about it is, I think, seeing similar patterns in people over and over and over again, it really helps me to kind of hone in of, I've seen this so many times, I recognize it, and it gets super easy for me to see it, but other people who aren't encountering it so many hours a week don't catch it. And so it's fun to point that out, and it helps me create systems, because as I work through it with clients and figure out what works for them, I get a ton of ideas that I kind of keep in my protocol manual to offer to other people, and honing it and finessing it every time I'm teaching it or talking about it with someone or hearing what's worked for them. And
Get
that's
a little
where
clearer
it's fun.
and a little better.
Yeah, and it constantly grows and evolves. And and it starts with the training that you get in grad school, but you can only learn so much, and then you have to go practice it. And that's where it really evolves, is having the hours with clients and, my own personal reflections. I practice CBT on myself every day, all day. And so seeing what works for me and where I've run into hiccups, and then sharing that, it's fun to watch it grow in that sense.
So you mentioned CBT. This is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a quick definition for those who've never
Sure.
heard that term? They might be thinking we're saying CBD. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Cognitive behavioral therapy is the idea that we don't just wake up and feel a certain way. Our thoughts impact our emotions. And if you could just turn your emotions on and off and turn your anxiety off, you'd have done it already, and I wouldn't have a job. So the idea behind cognitive therapy is our thoughts are what produce our emotions and our actions. And so you can change thoughts. Thoughts are not necessarily truths. So a lot of the work we do in counseling is helping people recognize their thought patterns thought distortions, and recognizing that and then challenging them and amending them. And one of my favorite takeaways from a great psychiatrist I worked with back in Jersey, Dr. Morty Sosland, he created this thing called the 3 C's. Catch your thought, challenge your thought, change your thought. And that's the essence of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, and I love it. I didn't know of it until I started working with you, and you've kind of guided me through it, and it's amazing. I think you once said you can reprogram your neurological pathways. That's what we're doing, and I feel like it's happening. I feel like you start having, after you just practice and practice, it just kicks in.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, oh, I just did that, and it's kind of it's an exciting thing. Do you have a lot of wins like that in what you're doing? Like, do you get that a lot, or do people get stuck working through it as you're guiding them through this process?
It's both. It's 100% both. It's 50-50. We all get stuck in our own things. I go to a therapist because I get stuck in my stuff, and she has to help me do cognitive therapy of, Megan, let's challenge that thought. Are you projecting? I'm like, yes, I know.
That's funny.
So yeah, it's easier when you have an outside perspective to help you do that challenge piece, because sometimes we don't see it. But yeah, some people, it really, like for you, it just clicks. It makes sense, and you find systems and you start applying them in all the different scenarios. CBT is not for everybody. I mean, it's really a balance of your emotional brain and rational brain, and everybody's got kind of a different proportion of how much they're rational and how much they're emotional. So works a little bit different for everyone, but that's usually where I start.
If you were higher on the emotional side, is it not so much good? Like, who wouldn't it be a good fit for?
I don't think I've really kind of clarified or categorized that in my head. I think it's really good for emotional thinkers because it's trying to blend in the rational side of the brain. And I guess maybe it's harder for people who are already pretty rational to try to appeal to that emotional side. So I think it's really just about helping people find that balance with the emotional reasoning and the rational brain. And that emotional reasoning could just be so strong, it feels real. And that's where it's hard to challenge.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So you're here at Trail Talk. You're building out, this Provo, the Heber area. Your husband, now you mentioned earlier, your husband was in the video game world back in Baltimore. He was looking for kind of a change. He had to change directions as well to make all this happen.
Yeah.
So did he land into something that he's happy with, or is this?
He went back to video games.
Oh, went back to video. When you say video games, what are you talking about? Like, is he a developer, or what is he?
So he does something very specific, and you would not believe how specific it gets in the video game industry. It's like an assembly line, and he specifically does 3D animation. So somebody else makes a model of a person or a dragon or a character, and then he literally takes I'm going to mess all this up, and he's going to be like, have you heard anything I say? Like an XYZ plane, and he has to manipulate how they move, and he does lip syncing, and it's math and art at the same time. It's really quite interesting. Wow. So that's what he's doing, and he actually just started a teaching job doing an online course that he's going to teach animation for.
Wow. Yeah. So he's happy. It's a win.
Yeah. It's hard because, a lot of the video game studios in Salt Lake have shut down. And so he is kind of stuck doing remote work, which is great, but that's not always easy to find. And fingers crossed, that'll be one good thing that comes out of COVID is hopefully there'll be a lot more remote work available. Because, he's kind of stuck. Now that I've built Trail Talk, Heber, and Provo, he doesn't want to up and move for another job. So he's trying to balance finding remote work to support my business, which is sometimes hard.
And what has been the impact? You mentioned COVID, and obviously, we're all locked up. What has been the impact on your business, on Provo and Heber?
We've done a lot more telehealth, which has its merits and it has its problems. I mean, technology is great when it works.
Yeah.
I've done more sessions with people in cars and closets than you would know, which is funny. But the benefit to it is, you've got a mom who's got a sick kid who can't come to a session. Now she doesn't have to miss that session.
Yeah.
You've got somebody who gets called into work. They don't have to cancel a session. They can just take an hour lunch break and have their telehealth session with me. So there's some really nice perks to the telehealth. It's made it more accessible to that degree. The other part of it is this is probably not surprising to anybody, but with COVID, the increase in need for mental health has increased significantly. And actually, I think our numbers have like doubled since January.
Wow.
Which is insane to think about. There's just that much need and never enough providers.
Yeah. So on the business side, what is your goal now? I mean, here you are, it's been a few years as you build these two kind of branches or affiliate areas up. What is your goal? Because it seems like you have a line and you kind of want to protect the space where you are still a therapist and working with clients.
Yeah.
But it also seems like you're getting excited and having fun on the business side. Like it's really intriguing to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you hope to do over the next few years?
I think that's twofold. The vision with Trail Talk is to let people know there's a different way to do therapy and to make it more accessible and less stigmatized so that more people will come get counseling. I think there's been a lot of people who have come to Trail Talk, and we have the option. You can walk outside. Now you can do telehealth, or we have an office, but some people have never stepped foot in the office. They refuse and will only do the trail. And that's amazing because I think it's gotten more people into counseling. So that's the one vision, is get the message out, tell people about counseling and try to make it more accessible. And then for me personally, coming back to, always balancing self-care, trying to balance just how much time I spend working with personal life. And that's always the hardest thing.
Yeah.
But I think, growing Trail Talk, trying to add more therapists, that's my personal business goal.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of jump back to something we glanced over very in the beginning of the interview. We talked about the stigma of therapy, the stigma of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned, and I agree, this concept of Trail Talk really helps to take down another barrier. It seems a lot like, for me it was like, oh, that sounds cool. I can do that. Do you think we're making progress overall as a society, and it's becoming, and then that stigma is, things are getting better? And what are your feelings about, what do you see happening in the industry?
Sure. Well, I do think we're making progress. I think there's still a lot more room to grow and to destigmatize mental health and to look at counseling as more preventative, and we call them emotional tune-ups. You don't have to be in crisis to come get counseling. You don't have to have a full diagnosis. You don't have to have a trauma or anxiety. You can come to counseling to just work through some things, to better your relationships, to grow personally. And I think in certain pockets and areas, that's much more widely accepted. And then there are still pockets where, I won't go talk to a therapist. That means there's something wrong with me. So I think there's still room to grow, but I think we are making progress in a lot of areas.
One thing that really concerns me, and I've been in Utah for almost 10 years, I think, is, the suicide rate amongst teenagers is crazy high.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just bothered me for years and years, and I've tried to make a difference where I can with, the younger kids and through music and things. Do you have any insights into that or any thoughts on that?
There's so many things we could talk about. A lot of times I feel like the experience I have are the friends of people who have committed suicide or tried, and they're always questioning, what could I have done, or can I do anything different? And so I think for those kids, never being afraid to ask. The topic of suicide can be really scary, but research shows that talking about suicide doesn't increase anybody's risk or thoughts about doing it. If anything, it actually cathartes and relieves people who have thought about suicide to actually have someone to talk to about it. As a lot of times people walk around carrying that silently for a long time.
Hiding it, right? In the dark,
yeah. So I think I guess I would encourage people, don't be afraid to talk about it and ask your friends. And if you notice something, say something. I've had a couple of teenage clients, be concerned about friends, and I'd love to come in and talk to the high school and just be an approachable adult that people would feel comfortable talking to, or they've asked, can I bring my friend to a session just so they can see that counseling's not scary?
Yeah.
And so I guess, talk about it. Don't be afraid to bring it up to your friends. And, I think the more people that talk about the fact that they go to counseling makes it less scary and makes it more approachable. And that helps for the people who are scared to come talk about what they're going through. So I guess those would be the two things that I would put out there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think in a family space, so a family that might have a couple 12-year-old or 14, just a couple kids at home, do you feel like families should be talking about this in a proactive way? Like even if there's no signs of any type of depression or anything in the family?
I never want to do like a one-size-fits-all prescription, but I think it's good to talk about in the context of, even if it's not your kid, it might be one of their friends, and that's a hard thing for people to go through. So if you notice something with your own kid, of course, be bringing it up and talking about it. I think talking about mental health that would be a one size fits all. Everybody should be talking about mental health
Yeah.
and trying to normalize it, whether it's in the context of your own child or maybe the friends that they're seeing. I mean, that's one of the hardest things. You get a high school where one kid commits suicide, and then oftentimes there's a few more that follow. So, it has such a ripple effect. So, yeah, I think conversations around mental health and that it's okay to have feelings and it's okay to talk about them, and it's also okay to get a therapist instead of talking to your parents. Sometimes that's the first step, and then we bring the parents in. And I think whatever way helps people to open up and to just get the conversation starting, if we could normalize that and not force people to have to do it a certain way or to talk to a certain person, I think we should talk about feelings more than anything. And normalize that it's okay to have different feelings and that it's safe to talk about it.
Gotcha. As you were talking, I was just wondering, many people know that this area is a highly Christian area. Do you think that plays into, and so it's kind of an interesting thought to me. We struggle with there's all this mental illness, a high rate in my opinion here, but then there's this high, Christian religious belief. Is there anything, do you see any connections there?
The one thing I know research has shown is in highly religious areas, the LGBTQ community really struggles. And there's a lot more suicide when there's a higher rate of, I don't want to necessarily say religion, but just, conflict as far as it's not okay or you shouldn't be this way when there's not an openness to it. So I think there's that research that backs that up. I think from my own personal standpoint, it's a conflict of values. If you're told things are supposed to be a certain way or you're supposed to live a certain way, and then you feel differently, it's really hard to reconcile that. And so when people are not congruent or authentic to themselves, it creates a lot of distress, and that's a huge source of depression. And if people can't find a way to reconcile that, I mean, they can certainly get to a place of hopelessness and feeling like they can't be themselves, they can't be loved for who they are, because they themselves haven't been able to do that. So I think that might be where the conflict might come in.
And like you said, if you feel that way, just have the discussion. And I know sometimes in that situation you think, oh, what the heck's wrong? Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
I gotta hide. I gotta be, be full of shame.
Yeah.
But it's really the opposite. You need to reach out.
Yeah. Well, and I think you just kind of made me think of something that when we're teenagers, we always think, oh, this is just me and I'm the weird one and I'm the oddball. Nobody else feels this way. And we've thought that about ourselves. And then you get older and you realize, oh, gosh, so many people felt that way. I wish I'd have known. So I think, again, having that conversation about whether it's suicide or depression or even just feeling like you can't be yourself or you're afraid of being accepted, it starts there. I think that's where the conversation begins. And then if we can talk about that, hopefully we never get to that place of suicide and severe depression.
That makes sense. One of the questions I've always wanted to ask you, and now I
boy.
can, is how do you turn it off at the end of the day? I mean, and you said even as a kid in Jersey, you would, people would just come to you. You just naturally always had that. How did you get to a point where you could take all that, be helpful and care and guide people where they got to go, but still, like you said, the self-care, this off switch so that your husband still gets to see it too, and you have energy for him and your family, etc.
Yeah, I think the main answer, people ask me that a lot, and the main answer, I think, is when I first was becoming a therapist, probably in the first couple of months, I really had to reconcile how people could go through pain and suffering. And how was I going to make sense of the fact that that is a huge part of our world? It's always going to be here. And what's my role in that? And this is a hard book to read, but probably the best book I ever read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that's what he talks about is how do we make meaning out of pain and suffering? And that was like the missing piece for me as a therapist, to realize that through pain and suffering and our struggle is where we grow and where we become the best versions of ourselves. And while I would never wish anything terrible on anybody, the journey that people go through, I have such high hopes that what's on the other side is better, that I can tolerate that pain and suffering because I know that on the other side it's going to be better. And if people will hang in there and go through the process and allow themselves to grow, that it will be so much better. And I think that's the hope that I have. And if I didn't have that, I don't think I could do counseling, because otherwise it would just sound like people going through hard things, and that would be really difficult to hear every day. But for me, it's just part of the process to getting to that better side of things.
That more hopeful side.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I love that. So back to talking more about the Trail Talk side, the business kind of aspect. What has been one of the the biggest lessons that you've learned over the last few years as, like you said, you did not come out here. Well, according to Allison, you did. But according to you, it was really about this opportunity with Trail Talk. And now you're paving the way. You're doing some cool things in Provo and this Heber location. What have been some of the hard things you're like, wow, this has been a little tricky? What are some of the big, I shouldn't say hard, what have been some of the big takeaways or lessons that you've learned?
I think the biggest one for me is to not be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and try something new. I am a creature of habit. I play it safe most of the time. So for me, it was a big leap. And practicing what I preach, that difficult things help you to grow and make you a better person. So on the emotional side, that was my takeaway. I think one of the harder things has been, and I don't know how much you want to get into this, but like hiring employees.
That's exactly what I want to hear about.
Okay. That's the hardest thing I have found in this whole thing. People are like, how do you deal with clients all day? I'm like, that's fine. But how do you manage employees and hire and fire people? Now that's, if you can figure that out, you're good to go.
Yeah. Tell me the secret. Yeah. That is the hard part.
Yeah.
So what's that been like navigating for you? Because, I'm in the industry where we're in a lawn care service and all the industries I'm in are more service based. And so this takes a really skilled therapist to do what you do, and it comes back to you. So everyone you hire really has to be, a part of what you subscribe to.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a really hard person to find. How do you navigate that? How do you find people?
Well, first, it's either luck or divine intervention that I got some really great therapists. Sherry Klantz and Morgan Gonzalez down for me in Provo were the first two that came on board, and I just hit the lottery with them.
But
They've been amazing.
Was it ads? Were you asking?
I think I put an ad on Indeed. And,
really?
Yeah, and I think the idea of Trail Talk is unique, so you get a certain kind of person. But I've had some other therapists that, for different reasons, haven't worked out.
Sure.
Sometimes it's been a timing in life just hasn't been the right time for them to try to do a private practice, because it's really quite different than working in an agency where you just show up to work and go home. In private practice, you've got to do all your scheduling, emailing with clients, you've got to do billing, you've got to market, you've got to do all these other things, and that's not
You're
for
running
everybody.
a business. Yeah, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, so I don't think they've all loved that part of it, and then there have been other people who've really liked one part of it, whether it's Trail Talk or doing the mental health counseling, but just realized it's not the right fit for them. So timing or fit. And that's hard because, they're therapists. They want to show up and help people, but they're conflicted because they have their own needs. And when their needs aren't aligning, I'm like, what's going on? Something's not adding up. And they're feeling it too. And then, as the business owner, it's been a hard thing for me to step up and have that assertive conversation, because in therapy, I let clients lead all the time.
Right,
I don't lead.
Now you're the leader.
Now I have to lead. And I'm like, well, why don't you tell me what's going on?
and they're going, no, you tell us.
Yeah. So that's been a weird shift, just because that's not my natural position to take. So that's challenged me some.
That's funny. Has there been a moment that's just been really hard where you're like, I don't know if I can do this? Kind of a breaking moment and you got through it?
Well, that was building a house. But as far as building a business, I don't know that. I think probably the worst points have been when I have ignored self-care, and I've either gotten too excited and overcommitted myself because I've been generally happy, or I really, don't like to say no to people, especially clients. And so I've probably bitten off a little more than I could chew, and then been like, oh boy, you overdid it this week. I think I had 40 appointments one week and was like, I will never do that again. That's insane. Yeah, I was not my best self that week. So that's been the hardest part, is just the juggling and the balancing between the business, clients, self-care, taking time off, all of that, just trying to figure out, because it's always changing.
Yeah.
So that's probably, those lowest points have just been when I have not set good boundaries for myself.
The famous B word.
Yes. We talk about therapy all the time. Boundaries.
Boundaries.
Yes.
Oh, man. No, that makes sense. And I think you're definitely not unique in that. I think almost everyone I've talked to, that is the struggle. Because it's so fun on one side that you can easily neglect doing social fun things because you're just building something. It's really, it's exciting.
Well, and all the opportunities there. You can just say yes and do more and do more.
So has this kind of cracked anything for you in your mind? Have you thought of any other businesses or ideas that you'd want to get into, or are you just like, whoa, I'm just holding on here?
So because before
you said you had no interest, it was your therapist.
Yeah. So I got to tell you this funny thing. I went to a networking event once, and they
I hate
gave
those.
yeah. Thank you, COVID. We don't do this now. They did an entrepreneurial quiz, and I was in a room full of people that scored super high, and I was like, wow, I got like a 3. I'm not a dreamer. I don't have the big ideas. And it's funny because being in Utah, there's a ton of entrepreneurs, and I counsel many of them, and I'm like, you guys all have a similar personality.
Yeah.
You're always on to the next idea and dreaming about things, and you're just buzzing with thoughts and other things you could do. Not me. I'm a creature of habit. I'm like, I'm going to run this trail talk thing until I retire.
Well, that's awesome. So looking back over the last few years, are you happy with the decision to get involved on a deeper level with Trail Talk?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. Absolutely love it.
Because I know you said it was intimidating and it wasn't, and it's overwhelming at times to do any business.
Yeah.
But it's been a good experience.
I love it. Allison's the dreamer, and I'm the person that's like, cool, let me get in the passenger seat and I'll read the map and tell you where we need to go, and I'll keep you on track. And she dreams and comes up with all the places that we'll go. And so she and I actually pair well together in that sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So share with us, I'm going to have to ask you too, because because I'm so intrigued by therapy and I love it so much. It's just changed my life, so I have to really put that in on this episode. I really want to dig in as much as we can because I want to share this, the content, the things that you teach with the people. Do you have one, and it's a hard question, but is there one thing that you could share with others that might be listening that are struggling or maybe need a therapist but haven't really begun in that process, haven't met with a therapist? Mm-hmm. Is there something you could share with them, or a tip, or just a self-care piece?
Well, first, I would say if you're hesitant about counseling, it never hurts to go to one session. A good therapist is going to find that balance of never pushing you too far. I know even in my own journey, I've been scared at times to go to therapy. And when I really think about why, it's because I don't want to be pushed too far out of my comfort zone. I don't want to be forced to change something that I'm not okay with. And that's quite silly because no therapist is going to try to change you. And so I think therapy is less scary than people think. I tell my therapist most every session, that's a really good point. I'm not ready to do that yet, so we'll talk about it next time.
Put that on the back burner. Okay, gotcha.
And she's like, okay. She's like, I'm just saying, I think that would be helpful. And I'm like, you're right, but I'm not there yet. And so I think I don't want people to think therapy is scary if they're anxious to go because they're afraid they're going to be forced to change, or it's going to change, it's going to have fallout in the rest of their lives. I think, the goal is to evolve, but it's at your own pace and it's in your own way. So try it out. It's really, one session. Go walk and talk, go do one session and see how it is before you avoid it or make a judgment about it.
And if someone was thinking about getting started and they wanted to do one session, is that very, are all therapists open to that? Like, do they, it's like, I know some places like a chiropractor, it's like an evals, session kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's the first session? What will it be like for those that it might be frightened, like, maybe I'll try it?
That's a great question. I think at Trail Talk, we try to really embrace that. We meet you where you're at. We want to be approachable and truly accepting. And one thing I love about doing it is it's very different than going to an agency where you meet with 2 people before you even get to your therapist. When you come to Trail Talk, I go through HIPAA, confidentiality, cancellation policy in 3 minutes. And then the next question is, so tell me what's bringing you to counseling. And then I let the person start. And then we start walking, and we walk for an hour, and people are kind of all over the place in the first session, and that's okay. That's how it is. And just trying to figure out what they want, where they're going, and where they're getting stuck. And that's literally the first session.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do a lot of people come to the first session and don't come back? Does that
sometimes happen? Not often. I think usually once people get their foot in the door, I think they relax and see that it's not so scary and that really we're just a neutral place where you can say literally anything and not be judged.
Yeah.
And it's my job to find a way to accept you and help you accept you. A lot of times that's the biggest barrier is people are struggling with their own resistance. And so coming and talking with someone about it and taking all that pressure off and just feeling okay and sitting with things, I think gives people so much relief. Most people feel better after the first session. Just 50 to 60 minutes of talking about something and people feel better. But then most people want to come back. Yeah. Unless it's a bad fit, which, that happens. And I tell people, interview your therapist. You have to have a good fit. We're not for everybody. And no therapist is going to get upset if you didn't like them.
Yeah, I kind of always, I don't know if it's the right word, but if I'm trying to explain your role in my life, I kind of look at you like a guide. I tell people, it's not that she's going to solve your problems. It's not that I'm going to tell her the whole life story, but she's going to kind of guide me through whatever that, like you said, that block, wherever I'm blocked right now. And I think that takes off some of the stigma, and it's a lot less scary.
Yeah.
Almost could rebrand it, just the walking tour guides or something. I don't know.
I've called myself people's personal assistants. I'm just here to help you streamline your processes and help you have a more effective system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And winding down on more of the business side, what is a takeaway that you've learned? We've talked about some things, but what's a piece of advice that you would give to someone, maybe like yourself, that wasn't necessarily planning on getting a business, found themselves in a business? What's a piece of advice you'd give to them? Maybe someone's just starting.
Yeah, I think the reason I've been comfortable and successful is because I've been picky about the people I choose to be around. And if I trust the resources I have and I trust the people that are going ahead of me, paving the path or helping me, anytime I've been like, I don't really like the way they do that, or that's kind of unethical and that doesn't agree with me, that's my sign to get out. And I think that's been the best piece, is surround yourself with the people who inspire you, whom have similar values and make decisions the same, well, not necessarily the same way, but don't have conflict of values. And that's been the best for me, because when I don't know something, I trust those people, and then I don't hesitate to go talk to them and say, I don't know what I'm doing, help me out.
Sure.
So that's my best advice, is surround yourself with the people that build you up, that challenge you, but that align with the way you do things.
And I like what you said, and put trust in them. Put trust in them and rely on them sometimes.
Can't do it yourself.
Yeah, and I think there's, especially like you're saying, what you guys are doing, you and Allison and others coming on board, you're building a process. So put trust and faith in that process.
Yes. Yeah. And that's hard too, to back away from the process, to let go until you start letting go. And now my poor admin assistant, Rachel, does a lot of things. She's, I think, probably wishing I would not let go
not let go as much.
Yeah.
Well, then she'll need an assistant. We get Rachel an assistant. That's, everybody.
That's the takeaway.
Yeah,
from
that's
this.
what we keep doing. What are some of your favorite fun things to do? Coming from Jersey, moving out to the mountains. You've been out here for, how many years have you been out in the west side?
Since 2015, so 5 years, yeah.
5 years. I'm bad at math live, too. I was about to say 6. Yeah, so obviously that changes what your hobbies are. So what do you enjoy doing now? Because I know you like to travel.
Yeah.
There's just a lot.
Well, I had my first camping trip since Utah, and now I love camping.
Yeah. Tent camping, RV, what kind of camping?
Tent camping. That's as far as we've gotten.
Gotcha.
Lots of plans.
Primitive or?
Backpacking is too much work.
Okay, so not yet. Okay.
Not yet, no. Tent camping is great. Go for a night, go get away, be in solitude, stars, campfire, it's perfect. Mountain biking, I thought I had mountain biked before, and then I went on the Wild Trail with some friends and was like, oh, this is mountain biking.
Did you love the Wild Trail?
Okay, don't do it the first year that you move to Utah, because you're not prepared coming from Jersey. That's my advice.
Yeah, there's some downhill.
Yeah.
About 10 miles of it.
Should probably know how to make turns first.
You should. Did you wreck on the WOW?
I got off and walked a lot.
Okay.
Yes.
There's some sketchy turns coming out, but that is one. And this trail, if you guys haven't been on, it's in Midway, Utah.
Yeah.
That is one of the greatest trails.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
It really is.
Wild Trail is wow.
It is. Yeah.
So just more outdoor stuff. That's what you enjoy.
I love it. Yeah. Hiking has been amazing. I actually got into road biking out here, which I could have done that in Jersey, but never did. All the outdoors things, it's what you do here, and it's such the lifestyle, and it's just so accessible, and I don't know. It's just, I love it. If I'm not outside, I'm not happy, so.
All right, I got to ask this question, just because I can. We got to take a second. I got to ask you about the food here in Utah, because this is such a thing. The food back east is phenomenal.
I miss my Italian food.
Yeah,
oh
the food.
Gosh.
We ate so well growing up. You don't understand. Everything is so good. And you come here. Have you? How's the food experience? Has it been okay? Have you found some places?
The barbecue and steaks are great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I miss my Italian food. A Philly cheesesteak.
Yep.
Maxwell's is the best we have found so far.
Yes. And he's from Jersey.
From Penns Grove.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Penns Grove. That's right.
Another 15 minutes away.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of food I miss. Goodness. Soft pretzels, crabs from Baltimore. Okay, that was the other thing I liked about Baltimore.
Yeah, a lot of crabs.
Yeah, a lot of things. Whew.
Awesome.
Wawa.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
we have to mention Wawa.
And people out here don't even know what that is.
No.
That's like a travesty.
And you can't explain it, because it's when you explain it, it sounds terrible. What?
I know,
It's a
it sounds
convenience
like a
store.
7-Eleven.
Yeah, you run in, they're not very nice, and you get your hoagies, but it is next level.
Yeah, it is a quality deli that just, had a great business opportunity.
Yeah, and they blew up. I'd love to
Yes.
interview. I've met him before, the owner.
Yeah?
Yeah, back in the day.
Oh, that's really cool.
So,
Some tasty cakes. Oh, my gosh.
oh yeah, it's good stuff. And kind of summarizing, I just love what they're building. I love Trail Talk, and I love the way it's executed. I think, and again, and Megan knows, I will recommend her and her company to everybody, and I have. Anybody that knows me, they know I talk about Trail Talk because it's been so impactful for me. It's taught me so much, and what we've talked about, the CBT, and it just really helped me to get my mind straight. And like you said, even at the end, it's not so much at where I'm at on my journey. It's really just I'll come and talk about, hey, I've had some business issues that I'm kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I just find the places in my life that I'm stuck, or in this relationship I'm a little bit stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I'm dumb or I have issues. It's just I'm just stuck.
Yeah.
And I think that's like my favorite way is I just show up, we talk about it, we focus on the process sometimes more than the content.
Yeah.
And we get unstuck.
Yeah. It's almost like math work in that sense. Like,
Yeah.
you know the process, but sometimes you have trouble applying it to the word problem.
Yeah.
And so that perspective, I can help you apply that process to that specific word problem. And then you know how it is, like 50 minutes once every 6 months, and you're like, cool, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's awesome. So I highly recommend it. Is Trail Talk Provo Heber, are you taking on new clients?
We are.
Okay.
It depends on the therapist, so not to get into a whole thing, but I take insurance, so I have a little bit of a wait list just because there's so many people with insurance that want to be seen. And then we have a couple therapists who don't take insurance, and because they're self-pay only, they have more available spots just because people use insurance all the time. So
Gotcha.
in Heber, we've got Tanner and Kelly Page, both amazing therapists. Can I just give a little blurb about them real quick?
Yeah, is Kelly
Yeah.
related to Allison?
No.
Oh,
Isn't
okay.
that funny? Yeah.
Okay, I know Tanner. Tanner's awesome.
Yeah, Tanner's
He's
great.
a good dude. He hauls from Ogden, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hike, but Tanner's great.
Talk about energy.
Yeah, he's funny, man.
Yeah, he works in Park City, Heber,
Yeah.
Ogden. He works all
Park
over
City
the place.
fits in too, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He's outdoorsy, but he's also a licensed marriage family therapist. So he has that relational perspective and that background, which is so helpful with family systems. And then he works with kids. I don't have a ton of experience with kids, so Tanner's the guy if you have young ones or even teenagers. He's great, very relatable, loves being outside, walking with people. And then Kelly's amazing. She's just a gem, and I have her in Heber and Provo, and she's just so down to earth, so easy to talk to. I mean, you sit down with her and you feel like you could just tell her your whole life story. She has a lot of trauma experience. Actually, Tanner does too. So she's got a lot of trauma experience, and she's a huge advocate for LGBTQ. So if you're looking for someone in this area that's an ally, she is your go-to person. And then down in Provo, we have Kelly's there too. And then we have a new therapist whose name is Stefan Chase, and his specialty is working with people who are in faith crisis and faith transition, which is great there's a lot of that going on in this area. And so he loves working with spirituality. And then, of course, all of us are kind of general practitioners, anxiety, depression. And then we have Morgan and Sherry, who both take insurance, so they're pretty full, but they're also amazing therapists. Sherry's a licensed marriage family therapist in Provo, and then Morgan, her resume is pretty long, but she's amazing. She has a ton of hospital experience, individual counseling experience, has worked in hospice, has done worked at a ketamine clinic. She's really progressive and knows a lot of the most current research, things like that. And then she's, just great with anxiety, depression, trauma, all that. So, yeah, we have a good team.
Did you intentionally build that team in that way? Because I thought that was cool. I didn't know that you have some people help with this thing and they're experts in that. Is that kind of what you were intentionally doing, or did
I would love to. I mean, there's pockets where, I want to fit. I need somebody to work with kids, somebody who's great at relationships. We have a couple who are LDS, and we have a couple of therapists who aren't LDS. So, I mean, we certainly try to have a variety to fit everyone's needs. And I've just gotten kind of lucky that it's panned out that way. Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, every single person on our team has a similar vision. They just want to help people. They believe in incorporating the outdoors and movement into therapy. And then everybody just kind of has their own little niche in how they do therapy or what group of people they like to work with.
That's awesome. What's the best place? Is it an email or what is it website? Where's the best place if someone is interested in getting a hold of you or your team?
Sure. Probably the easiest is to just go to the website, www.trailtalk.com.
Okay.
And there's a place there where you can just make an appointment request, or you can call the phone number, or there's a generic email, which I think is admin@trailtalk.com.
Okay.
But if you go to, whatever location, if it's Heber, you just click on the Heber location and you can request an appointment.
Gotcha.
And it's that simple. It comes right to my email, and then we try to get back to everybody within 24 business hours. Sometimes we're better at that than others. Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, and we'll put a link below in the show notes. So
Thanks.
thank you for taking time, and more importantly, thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. I mean, I really, really cannot say enough how much I believe in this cause and what they're doing and the way they're going about it. So this is Megan Perry here with Trail Talk. Appreciate you coming by.
Thanks, Ate. Loved it.
Even though we sat outside, 95-degree weather, we survived it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a great one.